All right, so tonight we're going to take a deep dive through John chapter 5. That's John's Gospel, chapter 5. And as usual, according to the new way we're doing things, I've got the first section, which is free. So we'll be going into a little bit looking about Jesus and his attitude towards the supernatural healing, as we've just spoken about, and miracles. And we're going to have a little look at his attitude towards the angelic as well and the supernatural. Then we're going to take a break. And then when we come back for the people who are on the mentoring tracks, we're going to go into an activation. And then we're going to go a bit deeper into how the seer can engage with the Father and see miracles and healing. So let's go through. So I'm not going to read through the Bible verse by verse. If you want to follow it through, you can read through the scriptures in the recording or have the passage open with you. Everything I'll go through tonight, I've trawled through the scriptures. I've looked at the original language, and everything I pull out is basically either the context surrounding what's in the Bible or the original language itself. So I'll just give you a summary. The summary of what's going to go on here is the grace of God goes outside the community of God to meet people in mercy. And there's a lot of stuff to that we'll unpack. But the context is, right, Jesus is at Jerusalem for a festival. Now, to the Jews, festivals are of great importance. But John here doesn't even make mention of the festival by name. Now, for those reading it, they would have wanted to really know the name of the festival, what's going on here, because it gives them understanding of the time of the year, the significance of why Jesus is in Jerusalem. But John doesn't even mention it. And this is the first indication that names and dates and festivals are about to become obsolete. This is a big one for John and for the original Jews who would have been reading this, because they would have been big on the law, they would have been big on the Old Testament, the festivals of God, and actually John is saying these are fulfilled in Jesus. It's no longer a requirement to follow them or to observe them in any particular way, because Jesus fulfills them in himself on the cross. All of the festivals point to Jesus. And Jesus is about to embody the purpose of the Old Testament, the purpose of the Old Covenant, the purpose of the law, and the purpose of the festivals of God. So let's have a look how he embodies that. So it begins with Jesus venturing out at the sheep gate. You know what? The Bible mentions the sheep gate for a reason. We've got to ask ourselves, what is special about the sheep gate? When the temple was rebuilt in the book of Nehemiah, it was actually the only gate that was consecrated as holy. It's where the sacrifices were brought into the temple. The sheep gate was the only gate that had no bolts or bars. This meant that it was open all year round. It provided free access to all who would come through it into the temple of God. And this is significant. This is really significant. The holy entrance has no bars, has no bolts. It's not locked. It's fully wide open. And this is a symbol of Jesus. As we know, Jesus says he is the gate through which you go. He is the door through which you go in and out. It's open. It's open to everyone. And Jesus basically goes out from the temple through the sheep gate to this pool of water where many who were gathering who needed healing. They were the blind, the lame, the withered. The pool's name itself was Bethesda, which means, get this, it means house of grace or house of mercy. So we get this picture. At the entrance to the temple of God, the most consecrated entrance, the holy entrance, God's grace comes to those in need. It's a gathering place of the crippled and diseased, or simply put, those who need a healer. those who need to be made whole. And Jesus goes out to this place. He doesn't wait for them to come in to the temple. He doesn't wait for them to come and be cleansed. He goes out to meet them in their disease, in their need, in their depravity. He brings the holiness of God into their darkness. So let's have a look at the pool of Bethesda. It's basically a place of disgrace. And John describes that. It's the lame, the crippled, the diseased who are gathered there. So it's probably actually not going to be frequented by the common people or the pious priesthood. If you want to keep yourself clean while entering into that sheep gate, going into the temple, and you're a Jew, you're not going to be associating with those who are at this place, at the pool of Bethesda. But Jesus goes the opposite way. When most people are going into the temple to purify themselves, to enter into the presence of God, Jesus brings the presence of God out from the temple, out the gate, and into that place of disgrace. The place there, the pool of Bethesda, is described as having 5 porticos. That means 5 pillars, which biblically is the number of grace. Now, isn't it interesting that the name Bethesda also means house of grace? You see, the picture here that John's trying to portray is God's grace can be found where there is sickness, where there is disease, where there is disgrace. God's grace is with those who need him. It's not there with those who are self-righteous, pious. You don't need to get into that state to qualify for his grace. You just need to be alive. God's grace is often not found in the circles of people who think they've got it all together spiritually, but it's often found outside the church. It's often found among unbelievers, where God is actually saying, I want to meet these people and I want to bring them into my presence. So the secret here is, if you want to see miracles, if you want to see healings, signs and wonders, go where people do not already believe in God. Go where people need God. And there you're going to find the house of grace. You're going to find God's already gone out ahead of you, and he's waiting among those people to touch their lives and to make himself known to them. But let's take a step back. Let's look at the situation that Jesus found himself in when he went out to the pool of Bethesda. He found himself standing in the midst of the crippled, the lame, the blind, the diseased. And just picture it for a moment. The pool begins to stir. The waters begin to move by themselves. Now, this is a supernatural sign and wonder. We're told much later in this chapter that it's an angel of the Lord who comes down and stirs these waters. So for those of you who were with me in the training I did up north, it must have been over a year ago now, you would have seen some of these natural signs and wonders of those winds that came into the room. Even though the room was closed, the winds came in and we felt them. We felt that stirring. This is similar to what would have been happening here. People would have felt this. They would have been in awe at what was going on, what was manifesting. The waters themselves would have been swirling around. There would have been ripples and waves going on in that pool. And then we're told that actually the first person to get into that pool is healed. So this is an act of God that is happening here. But let's think about this. They were outside the sheep gate, next to the temple of God, where God's presence is, right? They could have gone into God's presence and been healed if they went through the right rituals. Instead, they were outside hoping to be the first into the pool when the waters were stirred to get their healing. Something's gone wrong there. They're not going to God, they're going to the angel of the Lord for healing. On the one hand, we can commend them for acknowledging the supernatural and angelic activity. But on the other hand, we see a limitation here because this chapter says that actually the angel of the Lord came down in its season, and only the first person to enter into the water was healed. This tells us that angels have limitations. They're only permitted to do what the Father has commissioned them to do. So this angel of healing was only commissioned to heal one person in the season that he was allowed to go to the pool and stir it. This angel had limitations. So we as seers need to be aware that angels have seasons of activity. You know, I hear some people say, oh, the angel was bored and I need to wake it up. And you might hear the testimony of the wakey wakey. And it's kind of actually a way of trying to rationalize what's going on, that actually angels have seasons of activity where they're permitted to do something and then God says, okay, that time is now over, entering into a different season. So the Bible makes it clear the angel had a season of activity. Angels are limited. They're powerful. Don't get me wrong. They're extremely powerful, but they're limited by what God has permitted them to do. They're also limited to one space and time in earth and spirit. They're not omnipresent. They're not everywhere at once. They're not in multiple places at once. They have a finite space and time. As such, there's only so much angels can do. So remember, their power, although greater than ours, is limited. And so we see, even though these angels were limited in their commission, this angel of the Lord was only able to heal one person, and these people had to wait around the pool for the season to begin, the season of healing to come. The people were still waiting. They were hopeful. They had faith. They didn't understand that the house of grace, the portico, the 5 porticos that was surrounding there, that had covers over them, the protection of grace, the covering of grace, was right next to that temple of God. They didn't understand it. They couldn't grasp it, but the grace was in the Father. And so Jesus came out to meet them. Does that make sense? The grace of God, God's intent, Father's intention is to bring his power out from his Holy of Holies and bring it out from the temple, out from that place of heaven, down to the darkness of earth, and to meet people in grace. No qualification needed. The gate is wide open in Jesus. God is bringing it out, and he's meeting people in darkness. So if we want to see the healings, we want to see the supernatural of God, we just got to look where there's need. Where is the grace of God on the need? Where is the grace of God in the darkness? We go there, we're going to see God move. We're going to see things happen. Now, the angel of the Lord had already been in that place. It was already prepared as a place of grace, a house of grace. So the angelic activity is already there. But the one that's greater, Jesus, is bringing the supreme power of God. And we're going to look at that a little bit more as we go on deeper into this. We're going to look at Jesus' attitude towards the angelic that's happening there, and how Jesus's power and mission compares to the angelic limitation. And we're going to look at how we can engage with that ultimate power of God to bring his healing and his miracles. Now, for those who are on the mentoring track with me, I'm going to lead you after a break. I'm going to lead you through an activation. We're going to go ask the Holy Spirit to take us back and witness the spiritual realm of what was going on here, to train and discern your spiritual discernment, so that when you're out there in the world, you can learn to discern the grace of God in the time of need, to step in line with him, to bring miracles. And we're going to see how that works with what Jesus describes in the end of this chapter. But I just want to open up now for any questions or feedback that people want to ask before we have a short break. So if you've got any questions or feedback, feel free to unmute yourself, wave your hand, let me know, and we'll have about 5 or 10 minutes. I don't see anyone, but can I be cheeky and nominate somebody? I'll nominate Joe, because I want to actually ask a few questions, if that's all right, about your experience in Brazil.
Yes.
Because you've already mentioned seeing healings and signs and wonders out there. Talk about it. How does your experience out there match with what I've just run through there with what we've seen about Jesus versus the angelic limitation?
Oh, gosh. Well, I suppose, and this is the second time I've shared this testimony today, that actually Jesus wants to meet people at their point of need. So I had 3 testimonies of praying for people's back pain. The first one, the lady told me the amount of pain she was in. We prayed, the pain reduced. We prayed some more and it completely disappeared. And she said, I can't bend over, and then proceeded to bend over and touch her toes. So that was a pure physical healing. And then the next day, I had a word of knowledge about somebody with ankle pain. And so in the ministry time, somebody came to me. She said, oh, I have ankle pain. Then she said, actually, it's to do with my back pain. The pain is going down to my ankle. So we prayed, but I just felt there was something more. And then, as I was sort of leaning into Holy Spirit, she said, oh, some relatives of mine have got the same condition. And at that point, I realized actually this was a generational issue. So I could pray in and break off that generational curse. And then the third time somebody came, they were a hairdresser and they'd spent years bending over their face and washing people's hair. And she'd had long-term back pain. So we prayed and the pain reduced, but it didn't go away completely. And then I was thinking, so what's stopping the person receiving full healing? And then I just had this picture in my mind of this person being burdened, being weighed down with I've got to go to work and I've got to wash people's hair and what have you. So I led her I didn't say it was a prophetic activation, but I led her in a prophetic activation. I said, well, actually, do you know what? Jesus wants you to give him your burdens. So could we just act out giving Jesus your burdens? Mm-hmm. And as she did that, she was completely healed. So I guess for me, it's I suppose interesting, isn't it? Because Jesus knows exactly what each person needs. It's not a formula.
That's right.
And so that person who was a hairdresser, who was just doing her job to get money to put bread on the table, had, in the course of her job, sustained this back pain, but God's grace and mercy. So I don't know if that really answers your question at all.
It's wonderful. Just so good to hear about what God's doing. And it's kind of funny because it's also it's not just limited to pain. We had a funny thing happen here. It's just over there. I'm gonna grab it. This thing happened, right? So in the gosh, it must have been over a week ago, a week and a half ago. I suddenly thought to myself, we could really do. It's really small. It's a practical thing, but we could really do with a power extension lead. And
Mhm.
we go away for Easter break. We come back and we've got this parcel waiting for us in our porch. I open it and it's this, which you can see. I still haven't unwrapped it because I wanted to show you that actually it was brand new.
Right.
It's a power cord and it's got many sockets, just what I was thinking we needed. My wife Angie said to me, "Oh, Lee, I didn't know that you bought this." I said I didn't. It came in an Amazon parcel addressed to me. So I checked my Amazon account. There's nothing, no orders. I've checked my bank account. No money's gone out. It's where did it come from? I don't know. It doesn't even have an invoice inside.
Yeah.
And so you see, even God's got this grace. It's about grace. It's not about having to get yourself right, having to have the right methodology, having to have the right technique.
Mhm.
I didn't even pray. It was just a thought. Oh, I think that would be useful for us.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it just appears.
Yes.
It's crazy. But this is God. He's so merciful. And sometimes people don't even verbalize their need. It's like this man that we're going to see after the break that actually this man was just sitting there
Mm.
and Jesus approached him.
Yeah.
The man didn't tell Jesus his need.
Yeah.
Jesus actually reverses it and gets a little bit cheeky with him, but it's funny how Jesus is. He's not conventional.
Yeah.
Um, but this is the way of God. It's just grace. It's like if you've got a need and God's grace is there, his power is at work to work in wonderful ways and actually bring a difference, to make a difference, to bring a change.
Yeah. So,
And
I mean, one of the other things we did was we did a bit of treasure hunting, and I
cool.
had this. I would meet somebody with yellow and green clothing on, and I thought, well, that's not a normal color combination. But God highlighted the young man at Subway in the shopping mall in Brazil.
Mm,
And when we went, he started to cry and he said, I'm a Christian, but my parents have been ill with pneumonia for 4 days and I'm really worried about them. And God has sent you to pray with me. And it was just the grace and kindness of God because he heard that young man's
mm,
concern for his
mm. It's
parents.
it's incredible. It reminds me of a story when I was in Argentina and I was in the Andes Mountains. It wasn't so far away from Brazil actually. It was Mendoza, and I remember it was beautiful, but overnight I managed to contract a serious fever and I started to get delusional. I couldn't walk as well. It was quite bad. And I was there with a group of missionaries, but they went where did they go? They went out into the camp. It was a YWAM base, for those who know YWAM. And they were just having a meal. I couldn't even eat. I couldn't walk, so I was in bed. And the locals in the camp who were running it didn't know I was there. But I was just praying. I was like, God, I really want to be healed. I want to be able to stand up. I want to be able to join in the worship, the Bible teaching, the reason why we're here. And this man comes in. And this man is surprised to find me there. He doesn't speak English. He starts talking to me in Spanish. He's Argentinian. And I'm there thinking, okay, God, I really could do with an interpreter. Can you please bring somebody? And in comes one of the guys. He was Brazilian. He understood Spanish. So he was surprised to find us there. He starts interpreting and he tells me the man said that he was just walking outside. He never hears the voice of God. He hasn't got a prophetic gifting, but he heard this audible voice say to him, go inside that hut. There's someone in there who needs prayer. And so that's why he came in. And he was surprised to find me. He said this never happened to him. This was the first time it happened in his life. And he was praying the same. He told me he was praying the same as I was praying, that an interpreter would come. And when our friend came in and found us there, he told us that he heard the voice of God tell him to go into the hut because he was needed. which is totally bizarre because everyone was out in the big meeting tent. But anyway, the guy prayed for me. I had a heat that went through my body, and I rapidly recovered from what, by the symptoms, and by there were actually mosquitoes out there. I think it was probably malaria, and I had recurring symptoms from that for a couple of years. And then I was prayed again in England when the symptoms came, and I said, look, this symptoms, it's probably malaria, please can you pray for me? And the guy prayed, and that similar heat went through my body, and the symptoms disappeared immediately, and they never came back. That was over 10 years ago. And it is, isn't it? It's just the grace of God.
Mm.
Just wonderful how he works. So yeah, I just wanted to give that to you guys in the first section of tonight, just to really encourage you that you don't need a big faith to see these things. It's literally, where is the need? Where is the darkness? Where is the grace of God in that? Try and discern it, follow it through, and just be expectant. Be expectant that God is going to move, because you just got to have faith that God's gone ahead of you already. He's already there. He just waited for you to catch up. He is awesome. Okay, guys, I think that's time to wrap up the first section. So we're going to have a break for about 10 minutes. So we'll come back at 20 to 8. And that's for those who are on the mentoring tracks to just go a bit deeper into this and press in. And we're going to start with an activation when you come back. So go grab a drink, get refreshed, and I'll see you in about 10 minutes. And it's good to see those who are going to pop off now. It's really good to see you guys.
God bless. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. If you like this video and would like more mentoring or teaching materials on the biblical perspective of these spiritual gifts, why don't you join me on my Patreon? It's www.patreon.com/Christian Seer. If you like this video, please give me a like below, subscribe and follow, and leave a comment below. Let me know if you have any questions, any thoughts. I love to hear from you.